You are watching
It seems
Xirtus.
like with your time frames, you would either agree with Kurzweil or you would even think the technological singularity as you describe it would happen sooner than that. And what I'm curious is what would be some of the events along the way that we could observe and say, aha, this timeline is indeed progressing according to your expectations? Like, what do you think we would see 5 years from now? What do you think
Right.
we would see 10 years from now in 2035?
So I get okay. So part of me will take this to a strange place, which is I think that multiple timelines do exist, and I can only speculate about how much the multiverse is really just subatomic arrangements that are being experienced by us through a linear fashion. But this is something I brought up earlier. We're talking about Nima Akani Hamed, who was responsible for predicting the Higgs boson, and when I talked about femtometer technology, which are smaller than nanoscale, smaller than femto, that we're talking about the domain of subatomic, subnuclear distances between arrangements of particles or of subatomic particles. And at that scale, space-time is not smooth, but kind of granular and foamy. And people talk about space-time crystals. So this idea that time is growing based on other moments that it's arranged like, and it's as a crystal would grow, that new arrangements are really the same arrangement that are repeating forever until you reach a point of entropy. So I think that we're already seeing these things, and that probably we're not the prime timeline. If they were talking about a horizon point, it might be a multiversal horizon point that eventually hits an apocalypse for one timeline, and then it takes longer for other timelines. That's part of the idea that something doesn't happen in this next timeline that happened in the last timeline, that something's different. But there's an inevitability that we hit that point either because everything frays out into nothingness, back into chaos, or because everything becomes better and better arranged. I saw that you brought up the omega point earlier, and the omega point, Teilhard Chardin's idea is a very religious and very Jesuit kind of analogy to the singularity. I think it is a Christian singularity for him, or a Catholic singularity, is the milieu of perfect symmetry where everything is figured out how to make the most energy, the most worship, I think he uses as his term because he's a Jesuit, but with the least amount of entropy in the process. So more and more self-service and love, all of these kinds of philosophical concepts he's talking about, they play into the idea of free will and of helping others achieve and realize their dreams. And there's been a lot of different mythological figures if you go back in history before the 20th century. um, you could say that if you needed technology to arrange these things, like, that's fine, but there might be people that can mentally realign or re-understand that there's quantum entanglement everywhere. Maybe there were Buddhist monks or Zoroastrian mystics, who knows, at some point that were able to reach this ascended cloud realm or something, and they can go from one moment to the next moment. I mean, this isn't my idea. It's as crazy as idea as it sounds. This is the religious text that you can read from Tibet or from Persia that have talked about this idea, that, or even India, that there are multiple versions of reality that are non-causally linked to each other. And it could have been like in the 20s and the 30s, there might have been, Russians, Americans, Nazis, who knows, space Nazis is Jason Giorgiani's favorite idea. And, it's possible that there are timelines like Spider-Man or something where there really are, UFO flying space Nazis or something like that. That could totally be, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, it's not that unlikely that in some version of reality, this could have already happened. But things are very specific in our own reality. We are at a point where we have this technology, we have these people working together, we have this sort of AI, and it's leading towards this progress where higher energy, higher nuclear power, these are the tools necessary in order to produce whatever rearrangement of subatomic or subnuclear distances between subatomic particles that we would want to see. And if we look at the technology like CERN or these different reactors, part of the deal is that you're able to control your own reality by having a machine that can keep things on the same causal timeline. If something else enters the equation other than the sun, and it changes the way radiation is symmetrically moving things forward, then you don't get the natural order of things. The expected order of how this degrades to the next would no longer be something reliable. I think this is the major kind of simple thing that could cause both the end of the world, like a lot of these articles will talk about CERN is dangerous or something, like cause the end of the world. Nuclear threats, right? Nuclear threats could cause the end of the world, but it might not only be that. It might be something that is useful for just rearranging reality in and of itself. And if we're able to channel and control, which again, AI is able to understand these things and how they work on levels that humans couldn't, we could very quickly find ways of channeling energy in order to project and into a vacuum, create an arrangement very similar to one from the past. So let's say there's a world where John F. Kennedy, you don't want him to die. Well, you could figure out exactly where the atoms were in Dealey Plaza, and you could recreate that exact moment using all the same materials, the same kinds of materials, like baking a cake. And then that moment could start from that spot and continue on based on the same radiation schema that was keeping that moment going. I think that's the kind of thing that we're going to look at in terms of a horizon point very soon. And that's really what 2045 is about. That's the difference between knowing the technology in the 2030s that we're saying, like that it could be accomplished, and then actual realization of that technology. People have been saying this might not be immediately democratized. I think that this is maybe the reason why certain governments are fighting so hard for this technology, is to maintain some sort of dominance if they reach this point, this kind of sci-fi seeming point. But it doesn't seem like they're taking it, that they're acting like it's not. I think they are treating it like it's very serious. The way the U.S. government is positioned itself with Stargate, the way China is positioning, and both of these things are playing off the inevitability of reaching that point. So America's making the superpowered machine, China's figuring out how to make it use less entropy, and then eventually by piggybacking off each other, this sort of manifests into an inevitability that there will be a supercomputer that's connected to super powerful nuclear technology. And this is the other crazy thing. You saw that they wanted to restart 3 Mile Island. Everyone's always been worried about nuclear power ever since the oil companies started making propaganda. But now you need to make more cat pictures. So people aren't really worried about, the Singularity or Terminators or anything else like that. They just want to have more pictures of cats and cowboy hats. And they're willing to put whatever risk forward for that potential. I think we're really going to see more and more people presenting themselves for the convenience of this thing as less worried for these risks, which I'm scared to go into or hesitant to go into the sci-fi qualities of this, but the idea of reality shifting to me seems far more serious than ever before. I mean, when people talk about the Berenstain Bear thing, right? The Mandela effect or all these things. At first you think, well, this is probably people forgetting just generally, or it could be even just governments are messing with people, right? Like just erasing books and putting just to see if they have complete control over the history of people with a psyop or something. But how plausible is it that if a universe is going to fall apart, that there can be a bleeding together of two different timelines, and that we could be continuing on down a timeline basically as one of them frays off into non-existence? Those are the kinds of things which AI has already started. People are asking these questions already to ChatGPT. Yeah, Berenstain Bears is really interesting. I don't know if you've looked into that one. It's strange because as a kid, I didn't care. Berenstain Bears, I remember Berenstein, but that's my fault probably for not reading it, I thought. But then I read this article from the son of the authors of the Berenstain Bears, and they said, "Oh, of course it's Berenstain. It's always been Berenstain. It's been Berenstain ever since the Tartars defeated the Visigoths in this battle in the 13th century." I was like, well, that's a very specific and interesting reason, right? If there's some kind of a battle that if it went the other way, and he's saying like, and if it went the other way, then we would have been Steins, because the Visigoths who used the Germanic would have, their language would have been the precedent language to define our last names. So little things like that, these little destinial changes in the timeline that might not matter 700 years from now, the way that we think they do in the 13th century. I'm sure it was a big deal who won this battle, but the main changes that it has are the names of these people, or the flag that they used, or some sort of a political quality